What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So what we're doing now is a final review for the Sony X930E. So for starters, I want to draw your attention to a couple of bulletin point things that you might want to consider as some drawbacks. For starters, the motion on the Sony X930E is not improved from the first time that I've seen it, and in fact it's every bit as terrible as I remember it being. So for those wondering, is the motion improved? Is it a better experience? No, it really isn't, and that's the biggest drawback and deal breaker for this TV. I find that motion is just really juddery, stuttery, and in a lot of content it's going to be very noticeable, so be careful with that. Another drawback is that there is a poor noise reduction feature. I mean, it claims to have dual database noise reduction, and that supposedly makes everything super clear and super clean all of the time, but I just find this to be not true and just all fiction, because when I compared it to the Sony X930E, I found there to be a heavy amount of noise, especially when watching shows like Criminal Minds. Now, I like to watch a lot of these over-the-air television shows on Netflix, so I don't have to go through commercials and things like that. And I gotta say, like, it's really disappointing because you don't expect there to be so much flickering. And again, no matter how I tried to set this TV, no matter what settings I went through, the grain was something that I found I could not avoid. I couldn't avoid it in any way, shape, or form, so that's something you might want to think about next time you're thinking, hey, this might be, you know, the king of TVs. Also, another drawback of this television is that it doesn't have the widest amount of DCI color coverage, so when you are watching HDR content, and when you are just even watching SDR content, there is a good amount of the details that you just aren't seeing. So I will point some of that stuff out later in the video. Also, there is a horrible amount of input lag. So if you are one of those people that are gaming and you want to experience the joy and wonder of gaming, this is not the TV to do that. You will probably end up getting destroyed online by a really high tier player using a much more responsive monitor, and that, again, this is very slow and sluggish. Now, another problem I had with this is flash lighting. There is a lot of flash lighting in transition screens. So for example, when you have to do a hard reset, you'll notice that the local dimming doesn't kick on. There's flash lighting there. No big deal there, I guess. But the big one that I noticed was in the menu options. So when you shift through the menus as you're going through the various menu settings, adjusting things like your Wi-Fi password, anything that you're just in the menus for, you're gonna run into that problem, setting inputs and things like that. I noticed that menus overall are undersaturated compared to the 900E as well, so that's also something to take note of. It's just at no point in time does it look like a punchy saturated image on the menu screen, which I found very weird. Like, so as you're flipping through the various Android applications, you're gonna notice like they're bar none far more undersaturated than they should be. So I don't know what's going on with Sony's processing, and they really need a patch to optimize motion, noise reduction, and the undersaturated menus, which Sony has really always had a problem with until the 900E. So I don't know how it happened that, you know, this is something that they're still sticking with. Now, it's not as bad as it was on the 930D. The 930D was unbearable, so the menus aren't that bad at all, but it definitely does have some issues. Now, with that being said, I want to go ahead and talk about a little bit more of the fine points between the Sony X900E and 930E, since it is a very common topic. So for starters, if you want to take a look at this picture here, go full screen on this video for me, and you know, you're going to notice that the Sony X930E has an excellent amount of color and vibrancy in this image, and it's just blowing away the Sony X900E by comparison. And that if you take a look around the orange of the honeycomb and the honey, it just looks so much more vibrant than the 900E, which will look faded by comparison. Now, why this is happening is because in the brightest scenes, the algorithm for the local dimming switches on, and you're getting the most optimized amount of contrast and control. And this holds doubly true if you're activating Extended Dynamic Range Pro, which again will make your image look amazing. So a note here is if you have the brightest objects on a screen, even on a black background, it will look extremely stunning and very, very, very good. So that's the takeaway here. But now I want to talk a little bit more about the DCI color coverage, because that's where this TV lacks, and things start to look undersaturated, and your image kind of does fall apart when comparing it side by side next to something like the Sony X930E. Now, for starters, take a look at the LG logo here. There doesn't appear to be a problem with it at first glance. It looks fine, and it appears to have all the color it should have. But if you compare it to something like the Sony X900E that has more color coverage, it becomes painfully obvious that there is a gigantic amount of color that you are missing out on the Sony X930E. So look at the undersaturation between these two logos, full screen again, and you will be able to see that difference. It is quite real. So while yes, you do have more vibrancy in the overall image on this particular image, you do lack the shades of color needed to pull out a certain level of vibrancy and the black levels to put a certain level of punch behind this image where that logo does appear oversaturated and overexposed. Now again, I didn't do anything fancy with the settings or anything like that, and I'll have a final settings video after this going over some of the settings to help you get the most out of your Sony X930E. So again, if you're a Sony X930E owner out there and you're looking for somebody to help you optimize that picture, I've got you covered. Just hang tight. I want to do this review first, and then we're going to give you guys the settings that you're looking for. All right, so moving on from this, we're going to talk about the shades of color a little bit more, because it's hard to like to identify on your own if you don't know what you're looking for, right? So for starters, let's take a look at the peppers here. You can notice that they're very vibrant and very bright, and you're seeing a lot of detail in the overall highlights, and that holds true across the entire image, and it looks good. It looks like a very bright, vibrant, striking image. What's wrong with it? Nothing, except when you compare it to something like the Sony X900E, it becomes very clear that you're missing shades of color. And now here's what I'm talking about. Look at all the deep, dark reds that almost look burgundy in the peppers, and then you have the really bright shades of red, and so you're seeing more shades of red from dark to light, where here it's all kind of flat in kind of one monotone color, and it just really isn't doing much for, you know, gradational palettes and showing you the full paletry of color that you should be seeing out of your image quality. And then factor in, you're also not getting the same amount of punch behind the black levels in the pepper bowl here. It makes it very clear, again, that the full array local dimming is doing something different. And again, take a look at the logos as well. And again, it becomes very clear that something different is happening with the processing between these two televisions. Now again, the Sony X900, the 930E is delivering a brighter, more vibrant image overall, but it's just, in scenes like this, it will struggle a great deal to show you the variations of color. And again, you can't doctor things like this. For anybody out there wondering, variations of color, shades of color, that's not something that can be manufactured. Either something has the ability to show you the difference between every shade of red, or it doesn't. So I wanted to show you this photo to point that out and to stress that to you. Now, that being said, they both do an excellent job, and they both are great TVs. It's just one's better at something than the other. Now, let's talk about what the Sony X930E can do that the Sony X900E fails miserably at. On the brightest scenes, it delivers a striking amount of contrast that will blow your socks off and make you really fall in love with this TV, which is why you'll see a lot of people being very positive about this TV, because this is its strong suit, right? This is where it becomes the Mac Daddy of them all. So take a look at the mountains, the water, the clarity behind the water, the color behind the water, the sky. You're getting an outstanding amount of contrast and detail not seen before until this television. Now take a look at the Sony X900E by comparison, and it almost looks dead and faded, and it becomes very clear that the Sony X930E is far more capable in this aspect. And this is what I was talking about when I was saying it has better color and better black levels and overall a better picture quality, because I was looking at a lot of demo content. At that point in time when I was telling you guys about this television, these are only like preliminary assessments, I guess. I hadn't had the chance to sit down and watch everything and really run it through the ringer. And now, having had that ability, I can tell you guys definitively, yes, when you're watching the brightest objects on a screen or the brightest scenes in a movie, the 930E is a champion. I mean, it goes without saying the TV is over 1400 nits. Sony X900E hits 1000 nits on a variable level, and that's on a 100% window, and it's not consistent after that. It drops off to being something like, you know, 850 nits on average. So yeah, absolutely, you're seeing a big difference between the two when it comes to brightness. Now, that being said, we're going to move over to this image where we're talking about that black level control. When things aren't necessarily as dark as they should be on the Sony X930E. So take a look here. You'll see the strawberries here not only have more shadow detail in the shadows around the strawberries, but they also have more shades of color in the red of the strawberry as well, where they again appear more flat on the Sony X930E. This is a big problem considering this is considered a premium flagship product, and this mid-range, as a lot of the uneducated people who are saying this would like to state simply because of the price point, television is doing an excellent job of showing you exactly what a television is supposed to offer in this aspect. Now again, if you go to a bright scene, it'll be the shoe on the other foot. You'll notice that in the brightest scenes, this is a reoccurring pattern. The Sony X930E is heavy-handed and it will slug the Sony X900E down to a mid-tier performance by comparison in these brightest scenes. And so again, it becomes a balancing act, but both are very, very high-end performing televisions, and you just have to know what they do better than the other. So take a look at this. The yellow is striking, the white is blowing amazing amounts of clarity and vibrancy out at you. But again, 900E is going to look faded by comparison if you're looking at the brightest scenes. And so if you're in a retail store where they love to loop the brightest content, this is all you're going to see, and clearly the 930E will look better to anybody who sees this. I mean, I would say it looks better. I mean, because this, on this particular image, is absolutely better. But if you put the shoe on the other foot and you do what would be nearly a 100% window of a yellow or a bright object on a screen, while contrasting black, as you see here, I'd say this is about like 75% of your screen right now being covered. And when you have objects like this on a dark background, the 900E will do better because full array local dimming gives it the advantage to optimize across the entire screen versus in a select few zones. So take a look at this, and you're going to see, look at the letters, right? Take a look at the contrast between the letters, the shades of color between the letters. One looks evidently more faded and less saturated than the other. And again, this is a result of not the Sony X900 930E looking bad, just the 900E just doing a better job than the 30 at providing you that full array color, that full array detail. And that's what I'm talking about, guys. So again, I'm not being biased. I'm not really trying to throw shade at this television. It's a good TV. The 930E is for the individual out there who needs a bright TV for HDR. You're really excited about, I mean, well, I can't even say HDR, to be honest with you guys, because I'm going to say this, and if nobody's ever told you, I'll say it. OLED is the best for HDR because LG's tone mapping is the best, period. Right now, there's nobody touching LG with HDR. Sorry, but that's not happening. HDR on OLED is the greatest you will ever see HDR look across the board for everything. Seriously. HDR 10 comes to life like you never would believe it. Now, albeit you still suffer from ABL and the risk of image burn and image retention and motion issues, all the same, but I'm just saying, you know, if we're talking HDR, OLED's probably where you want to go for that. It's not the brightest HDR, but it also doesn't suffer from this. Now, if you've got extra money to spare, you might want to step up to something like the Q9FN, and then now you're really playing with the big boys. That's a really, really, really nice image. Very, very, very excellent for HDR. But again, we're talking about the Sony X930E, and if you don't have that kind of money to kind of throw around and you're just trying to save a couple bucks and, you know, get a bright TV and a great experience all the same, I mean, this HDR performance is still really, really good as well on the 930E. So again, not throwing shade at that. But what I will say is this, you know, you're talking about something that, you know, you're going to have two sides of every coin. There are people who bought this television and are going to be very upset because A, they're either still paying their TV off and have to justify waking up every morning working to pay off a television that maybe is not the best, and B, a lot of people who are just fans of the product and maybe don't have any issues like I'm having. I find it highly unlikely, considering these are not only universal issues that have been found by even the top reviewers in the space here, but also by everyday people that have these TVs. So again, I'm not trying to really, you know, pull the curtain over your eyes and really blind the truth from anybody. I'm just trying to show you what it is. Now, it's a great TV for what it does. The brightness and the amount of contrast in bright scenes is absolutely staggering and stunning, but overall, motion is a problem. Noise reduction is a problem in film grain content, so movies like Transformers will look like garbage, quite literally. And, you know, this is just a big consistent problem that I found across the board when testing and when using this television. Input lag is too high, and all the things factored up being $500 more than the Sony X930E, the 900E is the better buy, guys. Sorry, but that's just the way it is right now. And if you can get it for less, then hey, you know, maybe it might be worth it. But as it sits right now, for me personally, and honestly, for my personal professional recommendation, I don't recommend you buy it at the current price of, you know, $14.99, you know, not $14.98, whatever you find it at. It's not worth that. Even $1,300, $13.98, not worth that. I mean, if it comes down to like $11.98, $12.98, maybe it's worth it. But right now, too much, too high. That being said, my name is Quantum Apotheosis, bringing you the apotheosis of information. And until next time, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.